It's going. Yeah.
All technology functions.
Now, this might be
I've never seen a computer that slow. I mean, like, it's not plugged in. It's just restarting. This is the article.
Okay. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right.
As soon as everyone quiets down.
All right, so I've been told I speak softly. If you need me to raise my voice, just kind of signal at me and I'll do that. So first of all, thanks to everybody for being here today. I guess it was about 3 months ago when we were sitting down and planning as a forum committee, and Kathy Gamer asked me to whether I would conduct an overview, facilitate an overview of the article we're going to talk about today, what Congress reveals about Lutheran denominations. I said, yeah, sure, why not? I'm typically interested in political matters, digging into facts, and so little did I know, I read the article, I thought, oh gosh, this can't possibly be enough for an hour of discussion. And then I read it again, and then I started looking at the Pew Research Center data behind the article, and suddenly I realized there is such a lot here to dig into. And so I'm going to do my very best to give an overview of it to you all. However, as always, this is a very active, engaged congregation. If you have questions as we go along, raise your hand. I do have a couple of question lists floating around at the end if we have time. All right, so to get started, back in August, mid-August of 2024, Ryan Kaler published on Substack as part of a series called A Public Witness, the article that Congress reveals about Lutheran denominations. And this article, he wrote this article in response to a flap that was going on and is still going on, as was referenced at several points in the service today. Negative commentary about the ELCA. Okay, and so we'll talk a little bit more about what got this all started. But before we do that, because that's kind of, the subject matter gets a bit heavy, because it does point directly at our denomination. I thought we'd have a little quiz and see how many of you know some of our Lutheran representation in Congress. We had in the last Congress and have now about 20 Lutheran representatives across, they cover ELCA, LCMS, that's the Missouri Synod, and the Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod Wells. Okay, so all groups are represented somehow. And actually, we have representatives from all of those denominations up here on the slide. Does anyone know who even one of these people is?
Yeah.
Okay, Joni Ernst. And who's, yes, Ron Johnson, okay. Yes, so Joni Ernst from Iowa, Republican senator from Iowa, and she is which denomination? Very good. Awesome, okay. Ron Johnson, third from the left. Wells, yeah, from Wisconsin, also a Republican. Anybody recognize the woman on the right? I thought some of you would know her. No? That's Zoe Lofgren from California. Okay. Democratic representative from California. And I bet nobody knows the guy in the middle. I threw him in just because he used to go to my church in Maryland. But he's, this is Larry Bouchon. He is no longer in Congress. He came in, I think, in 2012 with the Tea Party, and first came to my awareness when Trump was elected in 2016. That's when I really recall him showing up. I think that's when he moved his family to Washington. But again, he left. He is the Republican representative from was the Republican representative from Terre Haute, Indiana. And he is Missouri Senate.
What's Zoe?
Zoe is ELCA. Okay, so ELCA on either end, Missouri Synod second from the left, and then Wells, third from the left, Ron Johnson. Okay, so good job. Okay, let's move on. So primary sources for the presentation, again, the article that was written by Brian Kaler. How many of you had a chance to read the article? Not critical that you did, but great, and thank you. I think those of you who did, certainly you are going to surely have seen things I did not see. There is so much here. Please chime in. As I mentioned a moment ago, I think I mentioned Brian Kaler used data from the Pew Research Center, specifically a report that they put out every 2 years, very timely with the swearing in of a new Congress. It's called Faith on the Hill. Faith on the Hill has 2 parts. There is the narrative, and then there is the data. And they give you the list of Congress people along with their state, district, name, party, religious affiliation, etc. Okay? So the Brian Kaler article, plus Faith on the Hill, because I found I just wasn't satisfied with everything he was saying, I had to dig into the data. So I used both of those. If we get to it, I will also be introducing some additional information from the most current, that is the 2025 version of Faith on the Hill. Brian Kaler used 2023. But for what it's worth, again, it's current when it's published because Congress was sworn in January 3rd of this year. Faith on the Hill was published January 2nd. So it's very much of the moment. All right. Another word about sources, I did put a few resource sheets there on the table. There's only 10 of them. However, feel free to grab them and let me know. I can always email you the resource list separately if the hard copies disappear. All right, so how did we get where we are? Okay, so back in early August, I guess, of 2024, we had the situation where there was a lot of concern about Joe Biden running for re-election, and steps were taken, and before you knew it, Kamala Harris was the new Democratic nominee, and she brought with her Tim Walz. Well, it did not take long, maybe a week or so. I know the words here are kind of small, but maybe a week or so after that, there was, on the conservative side, some real efforts to label Walz and the faith that he belongs to. He is a member of an ELCA congregation. Okay, so over on the left side of the slide, you see an article that was posted on Dr. James Dobson's website. You might recognize his name from, I think he used to do a podcast or a radio show called Faith in the Family. He's very conservative. And I'm just going to read to you what Dr. Dobson had to say about Tim Walz and the ELCA. He said, Martin Luther, founding precursor of the Lutheran faith, possessed an evident pro-life mindset, according to Pastor Joel Gerlach, pastor and professor emeritus at Wisconsin Lutheran Seminary. But Walz seems to embrace his churches and parties two super rights: sodomy and abortion. We're unable to say specifically whether it is the doctrine of his church or the platform of his party, or both, that informs Walz's position on abortion. Whichever is the case, he joined Kamala Harris last March for an unprecedented visit to a Minnesota abortion facility. Well, enough said. You can already feel, just the negativity, for lack of another word at the moment. On the right, I included an article from Religious Dispatches, which is more balanced. What the Religious Dispatches article tries to do is talk about what is being said, because there was way more than Dr. James Dobson had to say. That's just one of the more colorful examples I found. And the article tried to put all of this into context. Okay, so what Religious Dispatches said was, these attacks reflect a conservative pattern of delegitimizing opponents, both political and religious. Barack Obama famously faced intense scrutiny over his association with the firebrand preacher Jeremiah Wright at Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago. So Obama was painted as not a real Christian, whose pastor substituted black power for the gospel. In Walz's case, it's more like being insufficiently Christian. Okay, so the fur was flying. And just a little more background on Walz himself, because obviously the article by Brian Kaler talks about the ELCA. But what really, it seems to me, got the lightning rod going was Tim Walz being brought in as the vice presidential candidate. So just very quickly on this slide. From Tommy Tuberville, who is a senator from Alabama, Republican senator, Tim Walz is a radical leftist. And then from Politico, which again is much more balanced. Politico was founded by two former Washington Post employees. The next great liberal boogeyman, Tim Walz. Hot stuff, right? Yeah, okay. So, into all of this comes Brian Kaler. Brian Kaler, a couple of years ago, maybe only 18 months or so ago, published a similar article to this, related to the United Methodist Church. Some of you might recall there was a lot of back and forth in the Methodist Church a couple of years ago. What are we going to do about LGBTQ+? Are we going to have LGBTQ+ clergy, etc.? So a lot of churn, similarly polarizing discussion as to what is happening now around the ELCA and Tim Walz. And Kaler says, okay, I've seen something like this before. I've done an analysis using Pew Research Center data. How about if I do that here to explore whether indeed the ELCA is truly as left-wing crazy radical as is being said? Okay. So he used, I really am not up to speed on his methodology in detail. He did not talk a lot about it, but basically he applied a similar methodology to the 2023 Pew Research Center data to perform the analysis to answer the question for himself about, is the ELCA really radical? And he looked at Lutheran members of Congress to see, what it's going to teach us about the red-blue divisions in our country, and he learned quite a bit. Okay, so before we go into Kaler's article, I was so impressed with what I found on the Pew Research Center site that I just had to do a quick plug for them. The Pew Research Center is, by their own definition, a fact tank, not a think tank. I think there's a big difference there. They are nonpartisan. They receive their funding from the Pew Charitable Trusts, and they really exist. There's some language on their website that says, numbers, facts, and trends, shaping your world. So they are trying to provide a balanced perspective on a number of different topics, one of which is religion. Okay? So if you've not been to their website, it really is interesting. It's where you can find the Faith on the Hill articles or studies going all the way back to, I think, 2009. They've been doing this for quite a while.
Quick question?
Yes.
So I always think of the Pew Research Center as religious issues, but you say that it's more than that.
Oh, yeah.
But isn't that a big part of what they do? Or is there a percentage? Or am I mistaken on that?
Yeah, so let's just even take a look. So first of all, if you go to pewresearch.org, you see underneath Pew Research Center research topics. So I'd suggest when you go home, click on that. You'll see a drop-down menu. There's at least 8 topics there, as far as I recall. One of them is religion. But even if you just look at the slide here, top left, key facts about the US Black population. And then right below that, US teens and adults' views of gender identity. This is a screenshot I took within the past week or 2 weeks. Okay, so
But the biggest one, in the middle, is really.
comparing levels, yeah, it's big, isn't it? And if you look in the top right, 119th Congress brings new growth in racial and ethnic diversity to Capitol Hill. Some of that, even though it's racial and ethnic, may have bearing on the faith on the Hill. Okay. All right. So, any other questions before we move forward? Because now I think what we're going to start doing is digging into the data in Kaler's article. I did take a couple of liberties because Brian Kaler did something interesting. He talked a lot in the article, words, and they were very clear words, but there weren't many charts. And I found myself craving some Excel charts, and so I did them. I'll tell you where the data is related to what Kaler did and where I had to fill in some things. All right. So the first chart we're going to look at is Lutherans in Congress. This is Lutherans writ large. This chart does not show denominational breakdown. We'll get there in a minute. But if you look at this, 118th Congress, I'm just going to use the cursor here. Where's the pointer? Maybe I can give
It's this.
this thing.
This.
Okay.
What's on? So I'm looking at that.
There we go. Okay, so if you look through this, here, total, 118th Congress, that's what Kaler's article addressed, 20 Lutherans. The 119th Congress, this according to Pew, 19 Lutherans, so roughly the same. I'm going to also say right off the bat that there was some neutralization in the Pew data. What Pew tries to do when they write their report is compare Congress to your average body of Americans. And one of the things that happens in the data when they do that is they strip the specific denominational affiliators. So you lose who's ELCA, who's Wells, who's Southern Baptist, who's not Southern Baptist. Brian Kaler, at least for the body of Lutherans, reverse engineered that for what he was doing in 2023, and he figured things out. He also found a few Lutherans who were hiding in the data. I won't go into what that means, but they were there. They identified as Protestant unspecified, okay? So he did some things to get to his 20. This is unfiltered by Brian Kaler in 2025. I'm going to contend, though, this down, I think it's tempting. I'm going to contend that there isn't much difference, okay? That the numbers are probably roughly the same across the 2 years. But what do we see here? We see a body that is across the entire Congress, again, just looking at the 118, 13 Republicans, 7 Democrats. So almost twice as many Republicans as Democrats. If you believe the 2025 data from Pew, that margin may have narrowed. I will just say I'm not so sure about that. States represented, I thought this was interesting. In the 118th Congress, those 20 Lutherans represented 17 states. See, that was a pretty good geographic spread, I thought. And in 2025, down to 14 states. No matter how you stack it, when you count those people who's in there now, 14 states are represented. That to me seemed maybe a little worrisome. Are we losing some geographic spread? Although this is just the Lutherans, not everybody. If you look at how they're spread across both the House and the Senate, roughly twice as many Lutherans in the House as in the Senate, both for 2023 and 2025. So again, not terribly startling, but this gives you the landscape across the entire US Congress. So that is House and Senate. Any questions about that? Yeah, this is not the it could make your blood boil slide. Yeah, it's this is just lay of the land. Okay, let's get a little bit more specific now.
Just in case you can hear me, we lost the podium audio and video, but I still see the slides.
Can you hear us now? Can you hear us now?
Sure, up there in the Zoom.
Okay.
Joe.
Can you hear us?
That shows up, it's bad. Yeah, it means, let's go off this computer microphone now. Can you hear us, Linda?
Yes,
Okay.
Okay.
I can't see the podium, but I can hear you.
All right, can you see the slides?
Yes,
So you have slides and you have audio?
yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for speaking up and letting us know. Okay, so again, just to quickly recap, since in case we lost the Zoom group before we move to slide 9. The top row of charts is the overall presidential vote. Country. Go to the right, you can see the ELCA vote, slightly more Republican votes than Democratic votes. And for the LCMS, it's more like a 2/3, 1/3 split in favor of Donald Trump. If you go down to the bottom, this is a slightly different, I think quite different question than at the top of the chart. At the bottom of the chart, we're taking a look at overall Congress by party. So regardless of denomination, if you just take all 400-some people in Congress, in the 118th Congress, you had roughly 51% slightly Republican and just a tad less than that. We've known that for the past 2 years before we moved into the present Congress, we had almost just Congress that stands strong over being so equally split across Republicans and Democrats. Moving over to the right, you see ELCA representation, so that's 65% or so Republican, the remainder, or pardon me, Democrat, I said the first one, and the rest minority are Republican, and LCMS, every last one, was and remains Republican, because that has not changed. Moving into the 119th Congress, the ELCA remains the only Lutheran body with both Democratic and Republican representatives among the group. All right, next slide is just kind of the recap. I share it because these are the actual slides from the article for those of you who haven't had a chance to read it. Oh goodness, it's not really tough.
Cursor just has to move.
Oh, I think you're right. Well, oh, there we go. Thank you. One slide further. So this is just more on Lutheran partisanship. So it's a very simple graph, but it says the truth, which is that if you put the ELCA and the LCMS and Wells on a line, the ELCA, and you put a line through the center of that, the ELCA is slightly to the left of the center, and the LCMS and Wells is way to the right, this way. So that's where things were and where they remain. Because again, if we get to it, we can go over the 2025 data near the end, but not much has changed. All right, so another interesting way to look at this. Taylor also took a look at Lutheran congregations. So the first bullet pretty much says it all. nearly 90% of Missouri Synod clergy and all WELS clergy with party registration. You can only know where there's party registration. So 90% LCMS, almost all WELS, are Republican. And the same is probably true, their congregational bodies remain similar to that, with some exceptions. And yeah, the second bullet, I'm just going to read it, direct out of Taylor's work. LCMS and WELS are among the most lopsidedly partisan Christian bodies in a 2017 study, with Republican pastors outnumbering Democratic pastors by 9 to 1. Yeah, it's dramatic. I think there was one study that was done that effectively said, if you look across all denominations, all Christian denominations, all of them, okay, not just Lutherans, the LCMS and the WELS are going to be heavily up on Republicans. Yeah, it's that was me was a bit surprising. For what it's worth, I was back in Maryland, a member of a Missouri Synod church. That's how I knew the Missouri Synod Conference person. The church I was a member of was much more balanced. I did not have the extremely Republican Missouri Synod experience that I understand can be out there. So to me, this article was really good enough. All right. So obviously, if you're thinking about this slide, pastors and their congregations, and in some cases, I think this is true of the ELCA, not necessarily our congregation, but in other ELCA congregations. Often when you have a Republican pastor, you will not be more affiliated with Democratic.
Hi, this is Linda again. Sorry, I lost audio.
Tested.
Can you hear us?
Yes, it's back.
Wonderful. I have no idea, but now the fix is quick, we hope.
Good.
Thank you. Good reminder. Okay, hold on. This way or probably that way? There we go. And click. Okay. So, formerly Americans changed their politics to match their church. Increasingly, interesting quote, Americans are sorting themselves out on Sunday morning on the basis of their political perspectives. All right. So this observation, Kaler cited some research that was done by Robert Putnam and David Campbell. And Putnam and Campbell considered the question of what happens when politics and church collide, which I think is exactly what we're seeing right now. Although Kaler didn't specifically reference this book in his article, Putnam and Campbell did publish a book in 2010 called American Grace: How Religion Divides and Unites Us. And just in case anyone's interested, that publication is listed on the reference sheet that's on the table. All right, so what I have left is I'll look at a few changes that occurred during the 119th Congress, and we can take a look at that. But some of that drifts a little bit away from talking about the ELCA and what happened in the election and what may be happening in our denominational body. And so before we go to just looking at the 119th Congress, I thought I'd ask, are there any reflections in the room? Moments of shock, moments of surprise, moments of I knew that was happening? Yes.
The last bullet there, Americans are sorting themselves out on Sunday morning. That is also happening geographically.
Mm-hmm.
People are moving communities, moving states, moving regions, so that they feel more comfortable with the people that are surrounding them.
Yeah. Yes, I have seen some of that. Yeah, no.
It strikes me that if somebody like Joni Ernst, for example, if she read the social statements in the ELCA, she would not be in the ELCA. Because the social statements of the ELCA are pretty much opposed to what Joni Ernst votes for.
I know. I hear you. I have a Joni Ernst quote here somewhere that I'd like to share if I can find it. But basically, actually it's not a quote, it's a statement from Kaler's article. Did you know that Joni Ernst was among those who didn't think anything was wrong with the January 6th riots, who voted twice said no about impeaching Trump? Yeah, so I agree with you. She is no longer the fourth ranking in Congress, formerly the leading Lutheran, but yeah.
I'm having a hard time understanding why they would why not just attack Tim Wall's abortion policy? What is the value of criticizing his church on top of that? Yeah, maybe you have some insight on that. I can't figure that out, why that's important to them.
I have some thoughts, but before I go there, Pastor JT, do you want to try to tackle that one? I mean, I have some thoughts.
You may want to repeat the question.
Yeah, okay. So the question, it's a really good one, is appreciating or understanding that a politician might want to attack Tim Walz. Why go after the ELCA? To what is the benefit there? And we do have a remote mic over here that I can turn on.
Yeah.
I put the volume up. Tell me if it's okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna stand by the computer too.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic question.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you can turn this one down.
I think it's about delegitimizing that Christian expression. So, if you have a large Christian populace who, for them, turn that off, that's annoying. Yeah, I'll just use this mic.
Okay.
I think
Turn this one up.
the point is, if I can delegitimize you as a Christian, then I consider you not a Christian. And so if I can attack your religion, because Christianity is pretty big in America, right? Especially within the voting blocks. And so if I can say, well, that's not a real Christian, right, then I might be able to sway people from voting for him based on that fact. He's not really a Christian, I can't support him. As opposed to just going against his stance on abortion. But if you can rope in everything else, just like calling Lutheran Immigration Refugee Services and Social Services a money laundering organization, right? You seek to delegitimize them as a religious expression. And so if I can prove to Christian voters that he's not a Christian because his church that he goes to, they support these things, I think that that's the point of roping in religious expression, because religious expression is a motivator for voters. So that's why I think they attacked the ELCA. And that's why we got attacked again, because, well, we spoke up against the treatment of refugees. The Catholic Church spoke up against these executive orders. And both of those two church bodies were the ones tweeted about, right? So if you can delegitimize them as a true religion, then people can kick it off. They're not real Christians. I can't support them.
Yeah, thank you.
At least that's my best guess. That's not bad.
Kathy?
It seems to me that also what we have seen with Project 25 and everything, that these ultra-conservative people are playing a long game. And that there have been a lot of times when they, we'll just put this little step in place, and we'll put this little step in place, and we do not really recognize what's happening. And now that Trump has made an office of faith something or another, and put of all people Paula White in charge of it, it could be steps towards Christian nationalism, or we as a government define Christian as this and you're not it. I think it's a crack in the door.
Can't really hear when someone up front faces the wall. People up front want to talk shit.
Maybe let's move the microphone out and.
Stay away from that.
Scary stuff.
It wasn't.
That's the problem. You're getting the sound too loud and it's reverberating back. Turn the sound
The
back.
sound wasn't up that high. I think it was interference, yeah.
Okay. What I was saying is that I think we have seen over the last few years that this ultra-right side that has put together Project 2025 and stuff, they are willing to take tiny little steps consistently that we often don't recognize. That, are they doing that? Well, that's just them. And they're patient, and they're willing to put little things in place one at a time. And so now Trump has established this, office of faith or something, a government faith thing, and has put Paula White in charge. If you don't know, Paula White is a prosperity gospel. And so it feels like it could be starting to put a crack in the door in the government deciding in the same way that they don't really recognize Muslims as a faith group, but now it could be, who do we recognize as really Christian? And our government says this is who's Christian and who's not.
Just gotta leave us alone.
What they're talking about, it's called the true Scotsman fallacy in thinking and rhetoric. So if someone says, or a Scotsman won't put cream on his oatmeal, and you say, well, my uncle's a Scotsman and he puts cream on his oatmeal, then they turn around and say, he's not a true Scotsman. So they keep moving the definition and moving the goalposts and changing the argument. And so there's no way to win in that kind of thing if somebody's using a true Scotsman fallacy.
No, they put salt in the water.
They do.
We do not put cream on our Scotch oatmeal.
Hi, Coco.
Was she saying something?
Is the voice going again?
Linda, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let me make sure we've got a little bit. Okay, so we'll move on a little bit. I'll share some of the Pew data from the current Congress and maybe compare it a little bit with what we saw in the previous Congress, 2023. All right, so important point about the Pew report, it's helpful for understanding Lutherans in Congress, but it is not, as I think everybody knows, it's not only about Lutherans in Congress. If you look at the Pew reports that have been issued since about 2009, what you see over the years is a slow but steady decline overall of Christian representation in Congress. In fact, all Christian denominations, all representation across all Christian denominations is going down. It's kind of by how much isn't really critical to say, but it is going down. Representation by non-Christians is going up. The only denomination across all Christian faiths that's increasing is the Baptists. Right now as a group, if you don't consider the unspecified group, which clocks in at 101, let's see if I can show you where that is. Yeah, here we go. So unspecified is 101. This is the bottom line for Christians. If you go up to the top, Protestants, 75 Baptists. So they are the largest group among us, the largest specific group among us, or among Christian representatives in Congress. And everybody else is going down. That's not necessarily bad news, but some interesting things are happening along the way. As we move toward diversity, or what we could optimistically call diversity, there's a category on here on the right called unaffiliated. It's, let's see if I can get it to show back up. Yeah, you see it? It's, yeah. There are 3 unaffiliated people right now. Oh my gosh, this thing is moving all around. Okay. There are 3 people who say they're unaffiliated right now, okay? And I can tell you exactly who they are. 2 of them are from Arizona, and they're all brand new. One's a Republican, one's a Democrat. They both sit in the House. Their names are Yasemin Ansari, she's the Democrat, and Abraham Hamada, he's the Republican. Again, both from Arizona. Anybody want to take a wild guess who the third unaffiliated person is? Yeah. Who the third unaffiliated person is? This is a unique category, and I'll explain why in a moment. Here.
Your mic is off.
Is it off?
Yeah, it seems like it.
Okay. We'll turn it up. Okay. So what I'm pointing out here is that there is a new category, or a new-ish category called unaffiliated. There are 3 people in the category right now. 2 are from Arizona. All 3 are representatives. So we have a Republican and a Democrat from Arizona. And then there's one other person that all of us should know. Anybody want to guess who unaffiliated person number 3 is? No, not a bad guess though. I love that, but no.
I'll make a guess.
Okay.
Is it Emily Randall?
It is Emily Randall. So part of the reason I'm making a deal of this category, until the current Congress, when we had 3 people identify as unaffiliated, there was only one person in the history of the Pew Report who previously checked in as unaffiliated. And that was Kirsten Sinema, also from Arizona, which might lead you to wonder, what is it with the people in Arizona that they're willing to raise their hands and be different? I think that's a category to watch. For what it's worth, these 3 people, Emily Randall, Yasemin Ansari, and Abraham Hamada, the 3 of them represent less than 1% of Congress. Unaffiliated, counted across our whole population, according to the Pew Research Center, is 28%. So what this tells you is that the people who are willing to stand up and be different don't necessarily feel at home, or fewer people, because I think this number is probably, if I were to guess, there are some unaffiliated or people other than there are people who are other than what they are claiming to be on this report, is what I'm saying. Just like we found Lutherans hiding in other categories, not necessarily because they were afraid. I wonder, I'm deeply curious about what's happening with the unaffiliated as showing up on this report. Okay, if anyone's curious, because I figured I'd look it up, our 2 senators are both Catholic. Both Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell are Catholics. All right, so this chart is worth a look. It's on page 7 of the current Pew report, and again, it gives you a count of how many there are, what percent they are, as compared to the percentage in the US adult population. Marilyn?
So, with on the left, the Protestant unspecified.
Mm-hmm.
So, is that they just declined to sit there, they identify as Protestant, but not any further than that?
That's correct. I will admit I'm Protestant. Beyond that, I don't, care to say more.
Okay.
And there can be various reasons for that, right? I mean, sometimes, I think Brian Kaler found a Protestant unspecified who was showing up in a Lutheran congregation, so he counted him as Lutheran, but there's various reasons, yeah. All right, so, yeah, interesting. So that's Congress overall. What's that? Oh, there's a question. Yay, okay.
So this looking at denomination, this kind of stuff, does it assume that that person then is running the country by the church? In that sense, all of this for me is kind of irrelevant, because I don't think that's there at all.
No, I don't think people are running the country. Well, I don't know. I have to say, in general, certainly up to now, I wouldn't think so. I don't think our Catholic presidents have run the country as Catholic, for example, if that's what you're asking.
No, I'm not.
No? Okay.
Well, yeah, but in one sense that'd be irrelevant, because,
Yeah.
And I think that same thing applies when we look at these as individuals. They're not functioning as a Lutheran, so, our Lutheran then controls you.
No.
That's the thing we absolutely have to avoid.
I agree, and I think Brian Kaler says something about that. It's that nobody should be, that a seat in Congress should not be dependent on where you sit or whether you sit in church on Sunday morning. And he comes out with that. So it's not that it's irrelevant. I think it's the fact so much that the reason this article came to be, and while we're taking a look at what's going on, is however many months ago, a group of conservatives decided to have some negative commentary about the ELCA. And I think the question becomes, can we look at this and try to understand better what's going on? And really that's what a lot of this is about. This is about, is the ELCA truly a left-wing body? Absolutely not. If anything, we're balanced. That's one question. And then some of the other questions that came to my mind as I went through this, because I just got curious about the data. And I started asking myself, what's here? Who's in Congress? But like you, I certainly hope that people are not showing up and, because we have separation of church and state, and that is a critical thing to maintain. Yeah.
Am I the only one that noticed that Trump did not put his hand on the Bible when he took his oath of office?
No, and we all did.
Yeah, so.
Well, yes.
So no one knows why.
No one knows why, right? So,
You never know what's gonna lie.
and I don't think it's a requirement either, is it? It's certainly a tradition, yeah. All right.
Yeah, no, it's scary what we're going through. I have to believe that God is still in charge and what's gonna come out at the end of the tunnel, even though we're gonna go through really tough times, it's gonna end up for the better. I think what's gonna happen is Trump is gonna show who he really is, and a lot of his followers may fall back away from him. That's my hope.
Time will tell. Yep, Marilyn.
This is a slight segue, but I wanted you to read it. I wanted you to hear this. I just got an email from a friend who works for EPA. And this is what she says. No, she works out of Seattle, but she works for EPA, national, yeah, federal.
Yeah, this is not
Which
good.
is in danger right now.
Yeah.
And I would encourage you to write, call, whatever. She says, I wrote to her this morning to ask her how she was doing when I read the newspaper columns this morning about the EPA. She says, Marilyn, thank you so much. I'm really afraid for our country, but I'm putting up a fight. I'm working with my union to try and help get information out and help targeted employees. And I'm definitely not taking the sneaky, ill-conceived, illegal buyout offer. In happier times, I would be planning my retirement, but they will have to drag me away from my work for EPA, and they may. I miss you, but it does me good knowing you're out there cheering me on. Keep calling your representatives and doing everything you can do. I've never felt this afraid for our country, the world, and the future. So I would really encourage you to make those calls, not only about the EPA, but also about USAID, because we've seen, living abroad for 4 years in poor countries, we've seen what USAID does in countries and how important that is. And the fact that that's being totally decimated now. I know we often feel like we can't do anything, but those calls do make a difference. And the calls to our elected officials from the state may be preaching to the choir, but they need the support. Patty Murray, who stayed up all night the other night on the floor of the Senate, but even calls to and emails to other states, because our future does depend on it. And this text from my friend Ellie today was really personal on how, her life is being affected by, she's worked for EPA for a long time and doing really important work with EPA. And as she says, maybe she won't be doing that very long. So be active. Don't give up. Keep fighting.
Right.
Have courage.
Just kind of in light of what Marilyn is saying and the question that Daryl was worried about, I don't think the purpose of this is to say our Congress people say, I'm a Lutheran, you can't do this. I think it's those of us on the ground that live our life with a lens of a particular faith walk, which is you love the creation, you love humanity. And so when we see a denomination that is 100% Republican, then you wonder maybe how representative they can be. But it's our job to say that based on what our faith walk says, these are the issues that are important to us. And then we communicate to our representatives or to other people and say, this is why this is right or wrong. And it's the congressperson's job to just simply decide what legislatively and for the country it is. It's not a congressperson's job to say what kind of faith view is right. But there's some concern that with the attacks on Waltz, the money laundering attacks on Lutheran social services, that we might be getting to what is worrying Daryl, and that things might be happening based on somebody defining a narrow definition of what faith should be.
Faith, exactly. And, you know, just to that point, Kathy, you shared a letter with me that the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod president wrote related to the grants. And he basically said in there, and it was very pointed, negative commentary pointed at the ELCA, okay? And one of the things he said near the end of the letter that really stood out to me was, and this was almost voiced directly to the leaders of the ELCA, I said, when we sat down 20 years ago and you refused to pray to the Father and the Son, that I could no longer sit down at the same table with you, and now here we are. My paraphrase, but very upsetting. And, you know, like, I wonder how we step back from this moment. If there's any note of thanks I take away, because I think we probably need to start wrapping up, it's the fact that the ELCA as a large body has diversity, and I think there's strength in that. I think it increases the likelihood that we're going to be able to have conversations across the aisle, if you will, that will strengthen us, and hopefully we're able to be an example too, to work with perhaps our other Lutheran brothers, sisters, our other brothers and sisters in Congress and just in life who maybe see differently. It's a hard time.
I want to say something to support all the support that you've been giving the immigrants. I understand that we've received a rather large sum of money and also another grant. So that type of resistance speaks volumes.
Okay. I want to thank you all. Not a cheerful topic, but I deeply appreciate your comments, your questions, and participation. And Steve and I are both thankful to be members of this congregation. Thank you. All right. Thanks, group on Zoom. What do I do next?
You can pause the recording.